This is KM Wyland, and you are listening to the 620th episode of the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode, How Archetypes Changed My Life and My Writing. Story and life are inextricably linked. To write better stories, we study life, and to live better lives, we study stories. There are many obvious reasons why this is so. Stories, after all, are meant to be relatively accurate reflections of life. However, the more I study story theory, the deeper the rabbit hole seems to go. And one of the most exciting discoveries down that hole has been archetype. All of story reflects an archetype, and all archetypes contain stories. When we talk about story structure, or genre, or character arc, or even trope, we are contributing to a larger conversation about archetype. By definition, an archetype may be categorized in one of three ways. 1, a typical specimen. 2, an original model. And 3, a universal or recurring symbol. All three are useful for understanding story. So, no surprise, all are also useful for understanding life. In a few days, on March 30th, I will be officially launching what has been, for me, the most personally important book I have ever written, Writing Archetypal Character Arcs. The book discusses the cycle of 6 initiatory character arcs that can be recognized in the human life, from the coming of age of the maiden to the adventurous individuation of the hero, to the leadership of the queen, to the sacrifice of the king, to the acceptance of the crone, and to the final wisdom of the mage. Now, the book goes much deeper than that, diving into 12 shadow archetypes that create inner obstacles within each transformative arc. It also talks about the importance of the resting archetypes that live between each transformative period. And it closes out with a look at the archetypal antagonists that grow with us throughout our life journeys. It digs into why the hero's journey is such an important archetypal arc, but also offers a more rounded view of mythic stories by exploring a fuller range of the human experience than just this one youthful masculine arc. I have grown multitudes in the writing of this book, and it is a book that I believe will continue to teach me as I progress through my own life arcs. And you too, I hope. I know many of you have already grabbed the ebook during its ongoing early access on my site, for which I thank you. You've made this far and away the most successful soft launch I've ever had, and I've appreciated so much hearing from so many of you who have already dived into the book and found it powerful. So on Thursday, the book will officially launch, complete with wide release to major ebook sellers and the paperback on Amazon, as well as a super fun giveaway on my site at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. But first, today, I wanted to take a moment to tell you not just about the book, but about how archetypes have changed my life. I have, of course, always been aware of archetypes. I have always derived meaning from story. Not just stories, but story. Thanks to the resonant power a good story can impart simply by coming into contact with someone. I paraphrase from Jonathan Letham's essay, Letting the Leopards In the anthology Light the Dark. Good writing does not make you feel as if you are reading it for the first time, but rather as if you have known it all along. When good writing strikes its steel upon the flint of archetype, there is a sudden unity of truth between author and reader. It is what Jean Shinoda Bolen described when she wrote, "I had a sense of experiencing something beyond ordinary reality, something numinous, which is a characteristic of an archetypal experience." At the time, a few years ago, of an existential crisis within my own life, when my faith in something greater had been shaken to the point of doubting there was anything to believe in, the question I kept returning to was, what about the stories? I knew deep within myself that the magic and the meaning I had always experienced through stories and the patterns found in story form itself had to be pointing to something bigger. The deeper essence and awareness of archetype came to me on the wings of Walking on Water, Madeleine L'Engle's gently ferocious ode to the power of art, to its ability to create what Carl Jung calls cosmos out of chaos. I highlighted and scribbled all over this book, writing what would become the first scrap of my book, Writing Archetypal Character Arcs, which I'll quote here. Archetypal stories are stories that transcend themselves. Archetypes speak to something larger. They are archetypal exactly because they are too large. They are larger than life. They are impossible, but ring with probability. They utilize a seeming representation of the finite as a mirror through which to glimpse infinitude. Despite their almost numinous quality, archetypes are a very real force in our practical world. Think of it this way. All the things we imagine actually exist. Aliens, vampires, dragons, fairies, all the memories of our actual reality also exist in real time in the same way. Regardless whether these things can be proven as corporeal, they still exist within the human experience and impact it. And the deeper the shared belief, the deeper and more meaningful the archetype becomes. Now, this archetypal experience, as Jean Shinoda Bolen called it, changed everything for me. I knew immediately I wanted to write about archetypes, but something within me understood this was bigger than just one blog post. I would need time to walk my own path, to see where it led, and ultimately to experience some of these archetypes for myself. So even though I knew quite early on that I wanted to explore the power of archetypal storytelling, I didn't yet know what I even meant by that. I knew the personal inner transformation I was already exploring within myself was about much more than just the usual mythic journey writers are usually pointed toward. The hero's journey, however important and wonderful in its own right, is only one tiny scrap of the bigger picture. For me, it turned out that healing my relationship with my own wounded femininity and womanhood, digging up and rooting out some of the deeply internalized misogyny from my culture and subculture, was the first doorway to a world wider than I ever anticipated. When someone gifted me Clarissa Pinkola Estes' Women Who Run with the Wolves, another archetypal experience exploded within me, and I began to explore the world not just through the masculine lens I had always adopted, but through the deeply vibrant, colorful, and healing perspective of the feminine. Later, I would read Kim Hudson's magnum opus, The Virgin's Promise, in which she explores the concept of a feminine partner arc to the well-known hero's journey. Although she posits this arc as an alternative to the hero, as a coming-of-age arc to be taken instead of the hero's journey, I saw the two arcs as sequential. I knew the hero arc needed to be taken within my own life, but now I could also see how the hero arc could not, in fact, be undertaken properly unless this younger archetype, what I would come to call the maiden, preceded it. My mind was blown. I dug deeper still and realized the classic 3 acts of story structure itself reveal a full lifetime's worth of transformative journeys. Turns out the maiden and the hero are just the first act. Now, if the feminine archetypes have been lost in the shadow of the youthful hero's spotlight, so too have the older archetypes, the mature relational archetypes of the queen and the king, and the elder archetypes of the crone and the mage. The crone and the mage in particular fascinated me. After all, story theory tells us the ending is in the beginning. Stories come full circle. It is their nature and their pattern. The early arcs of maiden and hero, however thrilling and prevalent, only gain context in view of their ultimate ending. It became clear to me that these 6 particular archetypes marked crucial initiatory experiences within the human life. If humanity, or at least certain cultures, were struggling to provide their young with authentic initiatory experiences, then might it not be because relatively few initiated elders existed to catalyze those experiences? Although the queen and the king are both important for teaching and guiding the younger archetypes, it is the deep wisdom of the crone and the mage who complete the circle by coming to terms with the larger meanings of life itself. They pass the torch on to the young through their spoken wisdom, but perhaps even more crucially, by taking their own final archetypal journeys side by side with the maiden and the hero. Once again, I could see how each of these archetypes lined up so perfectly with the important beats of story structure itself. Planted deep within every story is the seed of the entire cycle of life arcs. For example, I could see how, even though I was chronologically at a stage in my own life of cleaning up my maiden arc and embarking on my hero arc, I was also going through a crone period, a third plot point exploration of death and rebirth, approaching the end of one identity, the beginning of another. So I started exploring these archetypal arcs within my own writing. I started playing around with the arcs in my own stories, exploring what they might look like, leaning into what felt right, and learning about them from the inside out. At the time, I was outlining a sequel. And for the most part, the first book had taken the classic hero arc approach, but I knew I couldn't just repeat that same arc in the sequel. So I asked myself, what happens after the happily ever after? I looked to the next sequential archetype, the queen, and started exploring what comes after the hero arc. And from there, the mythic journeys for all these archetypes came pouring out of me. I stopped writing my novel for a time and went right on exploring the full expression for all 6 archetypes. From there, I started investigating even more nuanced archetypes, the shadow archetypes, the flat or unchanging archetypes, and the deeply symbolic archetypal antagonists for each of these 6 main life arcs. And suddenly I could see these archetypes everywhere, in books, in movies, even in commercials, and of course in my own life and the lives of people around me. I don't think anyone needs to be told how to use archetypes in life. By their very nature, archetypes come loaded with all the personal revelations one needs. For me, one of the most powerful tools this system of life arcs gave me was the ability to examine my own life chronologically and to recognize which transformative arcs I may have already finished, which archetype I was currently working with, and which transformative arcs I may yet be fortunate and hopefully courageous enough to take in the future. Seeing one's life through the lens of archetypes provides context and direction. The archetypes provide us the initiatory experiences we need in each new chapter of our lives. The archetypes themselves can offer guidance even when these same archetypes may not be embodied by other people in our own lives. Indeed, the archetypes can help us grow, eventually, into the embodied elders our world so desperately needs. The more clearly we see and embody archetypes within our own lives, the more intuitive our ability to write stories of all genres that resonate powerfully with readers. And likewise, the more truly archetypal stories we are able to read or watch, the more gracefully we will be able to navigate through our own triumphs and travails. And so, I invite you to join me on this epic journey of writing not just better books and films, but also in writing our own life stories with intentionality and appreciation. So if you're interested in going further, here is the back cover copy of Writing Archetypal Character Arcs. The 6 transformational character arcs of the human life. Are you ready to take your story's character arcs and themes to the next level? This latest book ventures far beyond the popular and pervasive hero's journey to explore 6 important archetypal character arcs, representing key moments of initiation in the human experience: the maiden, the hero, the queen, the king, the crone, and the mage. Found in every genre, from fantasy to drama to romance to adventure, these transformational stories are the secret of powerhouse fiction, as shown through a wide variety of real story examples throughout the book. Writing archetypal character arcs will teach you the archetypal beats for each of the 6 journeys, which archetypes are right for your particular story, the best way to use archetypes in a series, how to choose the right archetypes for supporting characters, and how to use archetypes to identify your story's theme. You will also learn how to deepen your stories by implementing shadow archetypes, the negative sides of each positive archetype, resting or flat archetypes, the fixed stages between each of the main arcs, and archetypal antagonists, the epic antagonistic forces that oppose each of the positive archetypes in their journeys. The hero's journey is just the beginning. Learning about archetypal character arcs will change the way you view stories and life forever. So if you're interested, you can purchase the ebook in EPUB format right now on my site at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com/store. Or you can stay tuned for the official launch happening in just a few days on March 30th. This will be when the paperback releases and when the ebook goes live on major platforms such as Amazon, Apple Books, and more. I will also be celebrating, as usual, with a big prize giveaway. So even if you've already purchased the book, stop back in on Thursday for a chance to win. Thank you all for co-writing with me this story that is our lives. Happy writing. And I hope you'll stop by the site and tell me your opinion. Have you ever explored using archetypes in your stories or in your life? If you'd like to be part of the word player community over on my site and join in the conversation on this subject, be sure to stop by the website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. You can always find a transcript of the most recent podcast and add your voice to the discussion by visiting the first post on the site's homepage. And don't forget that if you're looking for an older post, you can always find those by putting the podcast title in the search field at the top of the right-hand column. If you enjoyed this podcast, you can subscribe on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and Amazon Music, or whatever your favorite podcast platform may be. And if you'd like to do something to support helping writers become authors, it always means a ton if you're able to leave just a quick rating or review on your site of choice. Also, many thanks to those who support my work on Patreon. Your patronage helps make helping writers become authors and its many resources available to writers everywhere. If you're interested in becoming a patron, you can find out more at patreon.com/kmwyland. Thank you so much for listening to the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast, and be sure to check back again next week.